I live here in Phoenix. I have triple glazed windows in my house. I have a steam humidification system for the wintertime. I have an ERV in my house for interior respiratory health. Not because of whether you can afford it, it's the way that human beings function best. So as an industry, we just have to set the bar on where do you live, what's the client's conditions and expectations.
Today on the Curious Builder podcast, we had Mark LaLiberte on talk about a fasten your seatbelt approach. There is a lot of information covered in here. So if you're ready to learn a lot and elevate your business and understand how you can set your company up for the next decades of your business, as well as set yourself apart from your peers, you're going to want to listen to this episode. Without further ado, here's Mark LaLiberte. Welcome to the Curious Builder Podcast. I'm Mark Williams, your host. Today I have a very special guest. I've got Mark LaLiberte, originally from Minnesota, but now from Cave Valley? Is it Cave Valley,
Creek.
Arizona?
Cave Creek.
That's a baller name, Cave Creek.
Yeah, good. Cave Creek, Arizona. What a cool place. See, what do you think about the town? Is quite cool. It's still a bit throwback. It's kind of a cowboy town. Still horses walk down the streets, cowboy bars. There's still a rodeo in town, and there are still biker bars. So on biker weekends, the streets are lined with motorcycles with lawyers that put on the hat with a little ponytail in back that comes with the hat. But people are jamming and having a good time. It's great weather, of course. I think it is. And I love it here. So
it'd be really interesting to contrast the Minnesota winters, especially as we dive deep on construction instruction between the two climates. We've talked a little bit about that offline before, but for those that don't know who you are, why don't you give us a brief intro? Obviously you've got construction instruction. Maybe just give a quick journey overview and we'll kind of dive into some other questions I've got a little bit later.
That sounds great. Well, in about 1984, I started a company called Shelter Supply in Minneapolis. We sold products of energy efficiency in nature, energy recovery ventilation systems. They were heat recovery back then. They hadn't come up with the ERV side of it yet. And then we were selling tapes and sealants and ventilation systems. We consider ourselves experts at selling products nobody wanted. So that's always an interesting exercise. You become pretty good at helping trade contractors and especially heating contractors understand what a ventilation system is. Why do you build tight buildings? Why don't you just let them leak? So that comes back into the late 80s. And then in 2000, I started a company called called Building Knowledge. And we were doing building diagnostics and building performance stuff. And I was speaking still nationally. I've been speaking nationally for probably almost 40 years. Last year, I think I did 150 flights, and I'll do at least that many this year. And then in probably, I would say 2010 or so, we started a company called Construction Instruction. That was myself, Justin Wilson, and Gord Cook, two remarkable individuals they are. And we did our first prototype of CI Live in Phoenix. And after 2 years of realizing how incredibly hot it is here in the summertime, which we knew, we did a great proof of concept. And once we were really comfortable with the concept and the layout, we then moved to Denver and rented a 12,000 square foot building where we have classes and do all kinds of really cool stuff. Like last week was the class on advanced HVAC systems. Inside the classroom, there's seating for 50. And then in the lab in the back, which is probably another 8,000 square feet, we have a 500 square foot house built with multiple systems and rear duct work and mechanical systems from ERVs to HRVs to mini splits, dehumidification systems, a pseudo crawl space, a conditioned attic. And then, of course, we have all the lab where we've got wall sections on mock-ups on wheels. We roll them around. We have a fan section, and we do water testing on windows with builders. So we'll install a window and then let it cure. And then the next morning, put it in a spray rack and put it under pressure. And everybody gets to see it leak and go, I do that. So they go like, I got to call back to my office and say, don't do that anymore. It's leaking. And so it's always kind of fun to see that happen. So I would say that that's pretty much the current history. I also work with a company that I co-founded as well called LaLiberte Consulting, where I do consulting on some high-end homes and mostly work in the West Coast on that side. So that's up to date.
I was going to say that's it. You've got a few things going on.
Yeah.
We could spend the whole podcast and it would actually be interesting just to hear, a lot of this podcast as people that have been tuning in here for the last 2.5 years, it's really entrepreneurship. I've often argued that most people get into building, not because they're great at business, but because they loved building or they found themselves good at it, or you got to be a painter or a cabinet maker or whatever it is. And then you have to learn entrepreneurship as like a new thing. It's a little bit like I know people that are doctors and they go to med school for 8, 10, 12 years, depending on their specialty. But then, that the idea that they would also know how to run a business practice. It's like a very small Venn diagram, but here you have all these small builders and remodelers all across the country and it is sort of it's just remarkable at how much perseverance there is in this industry and kind of can-do attitude. And I mean, we could spend a whole session just talking about that, but I am, it is just, I love hearing stories like this where I'd love to know, like, how did you start? Like, why did you pick this? Were you an engineer? It seems like you must have an engineering background, or do you got one by School of Hard Knocks? But why this industry? Why were you interested in even doing shelter products way back then?
Yeah, this it's a good question. I think it's somebody asked me the other day. They said, "Why do you continue to travel and work so hard?" And I said, "If you have an entrepreneurial spirit, you learn early on. I've worked myself my whole life that you just don't say no to very many things. You find out the things that you will say no to, which are right on the boundary, but your scale ends up being fairly malleable. I can accept things and go, "Yep, that'll work. That will work. That's within my wheelhouse, or it's just slightly outside my wheelhouse, but I'm confident I can accomplish it. Here's the fee. Here's the structure. If someone says yes, you're like, damn, someone said yes, so I got to go do this." But I think it's a really important thing. And I, back in like 1980, as you know, in the late 70s, when the first oil embargo came in place before you were born, it was one of those things that, I'm just kidding, but you're a little teeny baby, I'm sure.
I was 1980.
Yep. And so when you look at that thing, we saw the oil embargo come in. It was for the first time someone said, "You can't have the energy that you've always had." And the U.S. kind of went, wait a minute. What do you mean we can't have what we want and what we expect? So then the conservation market kind of took over. It's the Jimmy Carter years, put on a sweater and you're going to be fine. And we're all like, no way, I'm putting on a sweater. So I would say by probably late 80s, I would go at the University of Minnesota at Duluth, and then finished my degree at the Energy Education Center in Red Wing, which was a degree in solar engineering. And so then I got done with that and started a company called Shelter Supply. And that was really the evolution of looking at the assumption that the industry would naturally move towards better insulation, better performing structures, advancements in ventilation, heating systems, cooling systems, enclosure design, blower door testing. I did my first blower door in about 1983 and watched, we didn't know what we were doing, right? So we turned on the blower door. Somebody downstairs is running the blower door and we're up in the attic caulking gaps. And then they would yell back and go, "Okay, we're at 1500 CFM, stop caulking." So you go, okay. So we magically created that 1500 CFM of leakage was probably about right. And then you would consider the house was better sealed. Now, of course, we have the diagnostic tools to let us know what's depressurization concerns. I just did a depressurization test yesterday on a probably 20,000 square foot house with 2 open hearth fireplaces. And so this strategy about saying, what does enclosure tightness mean? And then once we determine what that is, then we determine what are the impacts under depressurization that could cause harm. Could it be combustion spillage, fireplace backdrafting, or is it just a depressurization that brings air in from I don't know where? So where do we make up air? And in this house, we have a makeup air handler. So I think all of this is about this evolution that once we started talking about it, we thought things would move faster. And I'm in 2025 right now going, oh, wow, we're starting to think about the incorporation of these details in every house. And I would say it should not have taken 42 years when we got started. We thought it would probably be a dozen years and people would go, "Of course, that's the way we'll do things." But now it's still a slog, Mark. I mean, I still go in marketplace and go, "How many of you think we're building too tight?" I'm like, "Oh, wait. But I would say that there is far less of that today than there used to be in the future. People are like, no, you got to build tight. You just got to provide proper ventilation. I'm like, oh, that.
I think adoption in education, I guess I'm not a scientist to comment on this other than just from a lot of different things I've observed over the years. Like, I think you get into these certain enclose or style, we're used to fads or we're used to styles that come and go. And there are certain classic styles that sort of are always there. I feel like education, especially around building science, and it's such a deregulated industry. I think that's probably been one of our Achilles heels, right? Like, I build differently than another person builds, and that guy, and yes, we have codes that sort of regulate it, but because there's no formal training to be a builder or to be a remodeler. And yes, you can get licenses and whatnot, but honestly, let's be honest, it's a couple hour test that you study for. And it would actually be interesting. It'd be really interesting to go back and take the test I took 21 years ago to see if I could even pass it. I don't know. Maybe I know more now than I thought I did, but like, everyone has a different knowledge gap. I bring this up only that you kind of have the Wild West. It's no wonder that all of us builders or whatever our business is now, we try to differentiate ourselves through service or creativity or artistry, but it's still very it's still not very regulated, in my opinion. Would you agree?
Well, it's a good observation, Mark. I've known you since the days of Minnesota. You've always been an extraordinary builder and care so much about not only your clients but your employees, the trades you work with, and then of course the end product you build. That's an important thing that really differentiates you. I would say, as you mentioned, services, but it's really who you are. But I would say that, when you look at the building code, you go through the 2012, 9, even 12, the 15, 18, 21, 25, or 24, 27. You look at those progressions of codes, and each one of them started stepping up from, hey, you should be careful that you don't electrocute yourself, to, hey, you should really think about thermal insulation in different climate zones. So we have seven or eight basic climate zones in the US, and started going through the strategy saying, well, wait a minute, if you do this has a repercussion, so we better fix that next time. And then you have ASHRAE thinking about how do we look at indoor air quality and saying there's a standard 62.2 and 62.13 that say, human respiration needs to have a steady supply of air, and you can't depend on leakage because there's no, if you asked one of your clients, by the way, I just want to know how big a hole do you want me to leave in the house? They go, well, I really don't want any holes. And you're like, oh, so then we're gonna have to do something about that. It's a crazy thought process, but your respiration cycle is about 23,000 breaths a day. So as we start looking at the building enclosure and say, as we incrementally tighten the building and put people inside, then it's a natural progression that we should understand the physics that go with that. So it isn't even about education in the industry as much as it's about saying, what do you think your clients need? Do they want to be comfortable, safe, healthy? Do they expect their investment to be durable for 100 years, regardless of how long they live there? Should it be aesthetically pleasing? Should it be affordable to operate and affordable to maintain? Those are all, and even sustainability, right? Those are all things that are an expectation by the clientele. The building industry is still, as you said, very well, it's sort of got a little Wild West thing to it, where it's, I'm going to bring in the trades, because remember, you technically, Mark, you don't build any houses.
Nope.
Your trades and your process does, but you're not out there banging.
I often say I'm a marketer who happens to build, and I love artistry. I love people. I love being creative, but I actually have used it as a sales line to my clients. Like, if you see me working on your house, call the PM because I'm ruining something. It's kind of like knowing half the people listening to you right now have either tuned out or tuned in. This episode is brought to you by Adaptive. If you're still chasing checks and juggling spreadsheets, it's time to upgrade. Adaptive is revolutionizing how builders get paid with AI-powered bill pay, automated draws, one-click payments, and built-in lien waivers. Faster payments, fewer headaches, and total visibility. Adaptive takes care of the back-end chaos so you can focus on what you do best, building. We've used Adaptive for 2.5 years and trust them to keep our projects moving and payments flowing. Learn more at adaptive.build and simplify the pay process today. For more information, you can also listen to episode 10 and episode 15. This episode of The Curious Builder is brought to you by Olive & Vine Socials. If you're a builder, a designer, or an architect looking to grow your brand without dancing on TikTok or spending your whole life on social media, listen up. Olive & Vine Social specializes in Pinterest marketing, blogging, and email strategy for luxury home brands. They help you turn your beautiful work into a strategic SEO-driven content that drives real traffic and connects you with your ideal clients without burning you out. Ready to grow smarter and not harder? Visit oliveandvinesocials.com and tell them the Curious Builder sent you. Just so you know, I've been working with Alyssa over at Olive & Vine for 3 years. She helped us launch the podcast. She's helped us grow our brand at Mark Williams Custom Homes. I could not do what I've done without her help. And I'm more than happy to announce that she's our latest sponsor for the Curious Builder podcast. One of the questions I have is, how does somebody implement education to their trades and to their people in a way that they can actually maintain? Because I feel like you are an expert. You'd be one of a handful of people in the country, let's say top 10, top 5, I don't know, but I know you're way up there. And so it's like, to the average layman who's building a house, you're like, oh man, I know Mark. So it's easy for me to go hire a Pat O'Malley, hire a Mark, which is fine. I think you should do that. I'm not saying you don't. But we also as an industry have to take some sort of passion and create and stance of like, we have to know some of this stuff. It's not like you can't know any of it and just hire it all out. But I think one of my questions is, you've advised a lot of people. I think you're spending 150 flights a year. You're going to speech and to teach and to educate. And that's obviously, I'd love to hear more about that later, about like what drives you to educate people. But walk us through just a few things so we don't lose myself and the audience
No,
with
we don't lose
ADHD. Like, what are some simple things, either a cadence or like some simple steps, so that somebody could say, like, I can't do this all at one time. You won't retain it. But what is something meaningful that you've seen people adopt and sort of maintain for their career? I'd love to hear your advice on how people should use a construction instruction, like take their framers or take their team, or if I'm going to learn what you know and then apply it without crippling my team.
for
Because a
sure.
lot of us builders travel to these summits, then we come back with 10,000 ideas, and our team's like, oh, great.
Oh
Mark's
no.
got another 100 things he wants us to do, and he's not going to do any of them. He wants us to learn them. So I think it's very valuable to hear kind of a prescriptive course that you would see to make this actually successful.
Yeah, Mark, it's a great observation. We don't have any trade schools anymore. So the trade schools are long gone. So, and we see that resurgence possibly going on now, the idea of creating some trade schools. But there aren't very many high school kids that want to go into the business of roofing, siding, cladding buildings. So we really are left with, and I don't mean left with, we really have a group of people who have learned their craft by the person who either went ahead of them, or they come in and they want to be a stucco contractor and they go, hey, you go be with Bob, and Bob's one of our lead guys. He's going to teach you. So that's kind of this evolution of how we train. Now at CI Live, we have builders bring their trades with them. I was at a training session for a builder out of Salt Lake City. They're actually in Park City, and called Big Canyon. And fantastic group of people. They do a phenomenal job. And I was telling them that they need to improve their HVAC. You guys got to get this better. So they invited and said they wanted their HVAC contractor to come along. Well, I sat in the room and they're in the back, and the HVAC guys are about 3 rows down like this. Okay, we're coming because you made us come, but we don't really want to be here. And so they sat there, and then after the first day, their hands kind of dropped down, and then they got a little bit better, and they go, oh. So airflow, building performance, comfort, durability. I guess we don't know as much about that as we thought we did. Hook up a box, run a bunch of ductwork to it, you should be fine. And we're learning that that's not always the case, that we have to help coach our trades through. We have to set expectations in terms of performance. I have a builder here in Phoenix. He sends out a very good list of criteria that this is what I expect you to bid on, because this is the criteria from an industry. So if you're the plumber, I expect these kind of fittings, this kind of detail, I expect this kind of work. I want you to pressure test when you're done. So here, now go bid my project. Now, if somebody goes, there's no way I'm bidding that, you're like, perfect, you're not for me. Somebody bids it back. Now you can compare apples to apples. Heating contractors, I want you to put temperature, like for here, temperature of 120 degrees. I want you to maintain a 70-degree interior temperature. I want you to make sure you've got humidification and dehumidification, mechanical ventilation. Now they put that on the sheet. Send that out to the trades. The trades come back with either, I don't know what you're talking about, can you help me? Or I can absolutely bid that. That's what I do. And you begin, as you do now, you do this, Mark, you begin creating a group of people that you co-educate together. And you say, listen, I have a builder in Denver. He says, I'm not paying a dumb tax on an elevated price by someone who doesn't know what they're doing. If you don't know how to do this aspect, you should go out and watch a YouTube video, go out and learn it, but you need to catch that and then bring it back to me. I'm not going to pay you double to learn something that you don't know, because that's the normal process here, right? You go, hey, I want you to do this. The guy goes, oh yeah, that's going to be 10,000. How did you come up with that number? And he goes, well, I pulled it out of, and so the strategy is don't do that. How much time do you think it'll take? I have no idea. Well, then let's work together. You put it in and keep track of the hours that you find are above and beyond what you did previously. Let's say it's 10 extra hours. What do you want for an hourly rate? $100, done. $1,000 is better.
It's
When
funny.
it's not,
So a practical example for those listening. So we're doing this house right now called Misa House, which is a home all based on wellness. And I've worked with a lot of brand partners, and we're, shout out to Stego. I actually saw him on Nick Schiffer's project, and I think Brad might use Stego as well. I don't
no,
see him a lot around here.
yep.
But 15 mil poly, and we're working a deal with them. So we'll do some photography and videography in exchange for the material. It's not super expensive, but just something we can do.
Yep.
And my concrete mason, I said, hey, we're including this. And he said that stuff takes a lot of time to put in. That's why I'm bringing it up. Literally, I had this conversation yesterday,
Yeah.
and I said, "Okay, guys, this isn't an option. This is what we are doing." And he goes, "Well, is this going to be your standard going forward, or is this just one of Mark's ideas?" I was like, "Well played. That is actually pretty accurate." But yes, this is likely going to be my standard going forward. I'll tell you what I'll do. you keep track of your hours, because he goes, it will take us longer. I said, no problem. I'd be happy to pay you for it. But why don't we just do time and material? I'll supply the material, you put it in, and then let's track it. Let's find out how much more time it really takes. And I'll use this as an education point of view. I mean, that's literally what the podcast is. Here I am asking you about education. I guess I've been doing it without thinking about it. It's like, I like educating other people because I like learning. I have a hard time retaining some of the knowledge that I learned, but I do like the learning process. I find it
You're good at
interesting.
it, Mark. You do well. Good job.
Yeah. So anyway, going back to your comment, you're inviting your subs to help with you. One of the questions I have as a mini timeout here, as you're laying out this path forward, is, a lot of us, I've been very lucky, sort of outpunch my weight by really having dedicated subcontractors and trade partners I've been building for 21 years.
Right.
And, most of the categories I rely on one or two subs. That's it. Now, some of them haven't been able to make the transition as I've sort of escalated my brand and the homes that we build, and that's fine. And sometimes a client will say, hey, can I get a couple options here? But by and large, like, I've had one HVAC company for 35 years. Now, they oddly enough just sold their company, and the new company doesn't want to work on new homes. So I'm like, okay, I guess I got to find a new one. But my point is like, if you are a builder and you work with multiple trade partners versus one, because I think I'm the rarity in having one subcontractor per category for a majority of them, to fly 3 HVAC companies out to Colorado seems like a pretty big ask. I feel like you kind of devote your time to like one, and then you kind of make them the blueprints. Kind of like when people want to bid out multiple lumber yards because they have multiple relationships, everyone kind of does it differently. You almost need like one spec list, take off all the numbers in terms of the bids. You just keep the takeoff numbers, and you're like, bid, because no one really knows. And so even like a framing bid, I told someone the other day, like, there was $100,000 swing on framing. I'm like, there is not $100,000 of differences in this house. So what are you thinking versus, and he had a great example. He said, I've worked with this architect before, and they do a lot of things differently than most architects do. And we are taking it in the shorts on the other home that we're building right now. And so we are bidding this strong until we see all the details. I'm like, thank you. That's really good information. Just knowing that at a surface value, without you telling me that, there's no way I would pick you. Now we're going to get another chance when that was a price test. Anyway, I guess it just allows us to interact with our sub. True. So this is a terrible question. How do you advise builders to bring people to construction instruction if they have multiple vendors?
Well, yeah, and I was going to just mention that when you mentioned that flying your trade contractors, you don't fly anybody there. If you want to be my trade contractor and we're doing hundreds of thousands of dollars of business, you fly yourself to Minnesota, to Denver. You learn more about your craft. So I'll give you the opportunity. Here's where it is. I expect you to be there. So here's when I'm going. When you get back, it'll be a game changing for you, but I think it's critical that you attend. So you need to go. You pay the bill, you pay the lodging, you eat dinner. This is a way for you to get better. If you don't want to do that, you're not my guy. So most of the trades that come, they pay their way, because you're saying, look, I'll give you, like, I'm within Brad's office today. He's going to give some trade contractor $3 million worth of work in a year. I think you can afford a $1,000 fee to go learn something. So you don't pay, because you're saying, I want to see how dedicated you are to what I need you to do in the future. Imagine if you're one of my trade contractors for the next 10 years. We are going to exchange tremendous value. I'm going to hire you nearly exclusively because I watch you include education and improved process in what you do. You're my guy. I was doing a lecture in upstate New York not that long ago, and I'm doing a talk, and it's for the HBA of New York, upstate New York. And there's an old guy in the back kind of sitting like this, and he comes up after the talk and he goes, I want to tell you something. I said, okay. And he said, I've got some of the same trades I've had for 30 years. And he goes, my level of expectation is high, but I also reward my trades by telling them the quality of work they're doing and what I appreciate. And he goes, and I tell them that when they're done, they sign my house. I don't care if they're signing the back of a piece of drywall, a stud, a concrete slab, but would you put your name on what you just accomplished? And he said, when I asked them to do that, they were like, you know what? I'll be right back. I'm not ready to put my name on what I just did. And he said, when I had people sign that product, he goes, I use that in marketing of my homes. Your homes are signed by all the craftsmen that went before to accomplish the tasks that they did. And I think that has a little strategy about how do we get people to feel engaged in that there's a passion. that goes with what you do. If I get to install cabinets, flooring, concrete, it's either just damn hard work, which it is. But how do I get you passionate about the fact that this is a legacy product that you're going to have for 100, 150 years? Multiple families will live here. Let's do this right the first time, because it's not something you can go back and fix later. I was in Nashville last week, and I just had said to one of the builders there, I said, so when do you want to do the insulation well? Either now or now. You get one shot at this. So what kind of things are first try, do them well, they come back and act as the future of the quality of this product?
I think one of the barriers to a lot of this technology and information is, to the average buyer, it's not sexy. It's not cabinetry. It's not windows. It's not tile floors. I don't get to see it. I might do all of these things and it costs, doesn't matter. And I know we can talk later about it saves you money on sizing and all that stuff. But let's just say you do all of these things. I do external, like we're doing R12 on this Mesa house because I want to explore with it. I want to try to do no spray foam if I can, because I want to reduce off gassing. So I'm going to do all rock wool. Now I will have to do some spray foaming on a flat deck as well as my rims. But like there's kind of a place for everything. And I lost my question here as I got excited about Mesa house. Oh, well, shoot. Anyway.
Well, I think you're going down that path about the trade base.
Oh, it's sexy. I know what it is. It's like, it's hard sometimes to tell your clients about what it is. And I think part of this, we do need to be educated, because we have a short window to educate our client in what is sort of the Mark Williams standard. Because sometimes we don't actually need to tell the client, like, here's a reputation. This is what's important to you. This is how I would build it. I'm the professional. Most of the time, they're going to look at, as long as you don't hesitate and you're confident, like, great, I'm going to go with what Mark said, because, obviously he cares about this more than I do. And there are certain things that you involve them with. It's kind of interesting. Lately, I very rarely have I had clients, actually in my 21-year career, I've put in one geothermal system, no solar systems, and I bring it up to all my clients for the last 10 years. And all of them, and part of it is clientele age. I think, and I'm not saying that as you're older, you don't care as much, but usually, in my opinion, they're greenback greenies. They want to make money. They want to see a return on their investment. And we do have an issue in the United States. The average person lives in their home for like 7 years. Most of the payoff on this stuff is beyond that, where I think you go to Europe and it's multi-generational, and we'll save that for another podcast unless you have some insight on that. But but when I talk about wellness, if I talk about how you feel, like triple pane windows is now all of a sudden, I've never done a triple pane window. I'm doing 3 homes right now with triple pane windows. I'm doing it in Mesa house. And then my client who knows what I'm doing says, oh, why are you doing triple pane? I'm like, did you know, I do care about the solar heat coefficient, and I care that it's more energy efficient. But honestly, the reason I'm doing it is for quiet. I love going to a cabin or being in the mountains and being alone. And I like that sense of quiet. And they said, oh, we're by a road. Can we do triple pane in our home? And I honestly probably wouldn't have even brought it up to them. And now people are going after triple pane because they want sound. Not even, now, yes, you get the extra benefit of the solar and the energy, but like, I think it's finding the things that interest people. And that's where, as builders, we need to be educated, but we have to ask better questions to sort of lead the client down that road. And they may not be interested. They may not care, but at least we can say this is a benefit of this system.
Yeah, Mark, you hit on quite a few points there. I would say that we have to be careful. 80% of what a homeowner is interested in is what was done that they'll never see. So what they see, they walk in the house and it's got, wow, the countertops look amazing. Good job on the cabinets. I have no idea what's behind the drywall, and technically, I really don't care. So there has to be a decision that you as a building company make that says, we're only going to install our walls with this type of insulation because it's what we believe is the right thing to do. I could care less about that short-term payback, Mark, that 7-year thing, whatever. You're building this house to last for 100 years. So the next person you sell it to in 7 years is going to go, tell me about the house. Well, here's my bills. And here's the comfort of the house. The house is amazingly quiet, and we love living here. Actually, all the rooms have a really remarkable temperature difference, no temperature difference, which is the best house we've ever lived in. That's what this is about. But you don't go, hey, these guys are going to just move in and move out quick, so let's do it. Well, then make a collapsible house. So you're building a house for generations. So we say, insulate it the first time well, make it tight well, design the HVAC system to be designed. You're not going to replace that either. The ducts are buried in the walls. Use excellent piping. Put the right things in. What can you replace? Countertops, cabinets, flooring material. But there has to be a level mark where you as a builder and as other builders, where you do not compromise on the enclosure. It needs to be watertight, airtight, and thermally insulated. So whatever it is, you don't leave that up to the client. It's like saying to the doctor, say, I was online and I'm thinking you should maybe cut the other way because maybe that would be a faster way to get there. And he would go, well, you would die. So how about if we don't do that? And you're like, yeah, let's go with your idea. So your clients aren't going to come to you knowing. If you give them a choice of, would you like R21 or an R28? Which one costs more? That's not, you go, we install an R23 bat on all our houses, or we lower fiberglass.
I mean, again, a practical illustration to your point. And I think this is, I only say this because I think it's right in line with what you're saying. We had a home recently where, for our standard, for sure, now the last couple of years, we've done an R6 and we use a zip product. I'm sure there's other ones out there, but that's the one that we like. And you've got your foam to the outside and you insulate. And I wanted to try to do the flash and bat method. We wanted to do 2 inches of foam on the inside of that. And so we're experimenting a little bit. Now we're talking to our building knowledge partners and we're saying there's pros and cons. And here's the thing. There's really not a one size fits all approach to really anything. It's like classic belt and suspenders, and which is honestly frustrating for an entrepreneur. We all want the magic wand, the elixir of wonder. Like this one thing will solve all my problems. But it's when you get into all these systems, it takes a lot more effort. And going back to education, I get why people find this hurdle of kind of getting educated to shut down. You got to want to do it. And unless you get your team sort of passionate about it, like you're going to constantly hit your head against the wall.
Well, I would say that's true, except that I'll give you an example. There's a builder in Seattle. The company's called Murray Franklin. They've been around for a long time. And they sent some of their lead interior architectural team and their production team, and they sent them to CI Live. When the guy came back, he goes, I had no idea what I didn't know. He said, so now I'm excited about this. I knew that there was stuff around this, but because I didn't know, I just let the trades go, yeah, you don't need that. Oh, okay. And he's like, no, we're doing that. The guy goes, oh, you don't want to do that. He's like, absolutely, we want to do that. So all we're talking about is physics and math in a way that you're like, so if you understand that well, you have to be the person that says, this is what we're doing, and here's why. And if you don't know the why, they can flip you around until they go like, did you know that's going to cause this? And that'll be bad. You'll go like, oh, I don't want to do bad. So yeah, we better not do this. And you're like, actually, that's not what happens. Here's the dew point. Here's the temperature difference. Here's why we do it. How well does a sale go when the other person knows more than you do or knows less than you do? So if you know more than that trade contractor, suddenly you start going, I don't know if you're my guy. And because you need to know what I know. So I would say increase your knowledge base about the science and physics of buildings. Heat flows from warm to cold, moisture moves from more to less, that kind of stuff. Once you learn that, then you go like, so if the moisture goes here and it goes there, yeah, that's what would happen. You're like, exactly. So the insulation on the outside raises the dew point in the cavity to make sure it's less at risk. And you're going to go, this is why we do it.
When it comes to quality, craftsmanship, and performance, Pella sets the standard. Whether you're building custom homes or designing a timeless space, Pella offers innovative window and door solutions that blend beauty and efficiency. With showrooms and experts around the country, Pella makes it easy to find the perfect fit for your next project and their team to support it. Build with confidence, build with Pella. Visit Pella.com to explore products and connect with your local rep today. For more information, you can listen to episode 1 or listen to episode 109, where we bring on Pella owners and founders at Pella Northland, as well as their innovative team behind the Steady Set innovation. I'll tell you where it matters when it's negative 25 below zero in Minnesota in climate zone 6 or 7, and their windows are sweating like a sprinkler is on it.
Yep.
And you know what? Your humidity is set at 50. Well, your humidity can't be set at 50 when it's minus 27. And now, granted, that's a ridiculous example. Hopefully that never happens. But every homeowner that's built in the northern climates knows that you see that condensation on your windows. And there is a degree of variability here where I've had a number of new homes where I have to educate the buyer. That first January will come, and we actually went so far as to write a blog about it, because every single January in Minnesota, I would get a call from my new homeowners, and I'd be, hey, I'm happy to answer your question, but before I do, here's a blog I wrote about what's happening in your home. And 99% of the time, that's exactly what it is. And they have to adjust some settings. You have to have the HVAC guy come out and reassess it. And off its lifestyle. If you have a bunch of kids, you have teenagers, they're taking 20-minute showers or whatever's happening. Like there's just a lot of moisture in that house. And equally as bad as a house with no moisture. I mean, that thing will just crack like crazy in Minnesota. I mean, we see it all the time where your crown, especially on, painted crown, it's separating from the ceiling. And I can't tell you how many clients will come to me and say, Mark, we're building a $3-4 million home. We expect your craftsmanship to be a lot better than that. And I'll usually tell them, they forget that we talked about this a year beforehand, saying like, hey, your house is going to move. It will come back. We need to regulate it. Now, there are certain things you can do to mitigate that. There are cost levels to that. Is everything going to be engineered studs? Are we going to do another layer of plywood on the ceiling? Like, how far do you want to chase these cracks? And that usually, again, is an education. But I know some companies and some architects that are so high end, they're $1,000 plus a foot, they don't even talk to their clients about that. That is the level of execution that they operate at. Again, there's so many different layers of what look at a Ferrari. I guarantee Ferrari's tolerances for whatever they're engineering is way higher than, say, a Ford Focus.
Sure.
But it's, you're getting something totally different and you're paying for it.
Yeah. But let's just say something, Mark, though. Let's just say that, you have to tell a client, in order for us to live in Minnesota and have cold conditions and manage the interior conditions, here's the systems we put in place to do so. That's what you have to say. You'll be having triple glazed windows because it gets down to minus 20. I wouldn't build a house in Minnesota, Mark, without triple glazed windows. It makes no sense at all. So now you got a client that says, we're going to provide an energy recovery system that'll moderate your relative humidity based on production levels and the outdoor conditions. If we do put in a humidification system, it'll be a steam humidifier that will readjust with the outdoor conditions. The colder it gets, it'll lower the RH. But they don't want to say, by the way, you have to do this. They're going to say, look, I can sit in my car and regulate my temperatures. So my house at 10 times the price, 100 times the price, should have some of that control. So you'll say,
you're right.
House that's going to stay this way. We're going to manage the interior conditions, manage the interior air quality, and we're going to manage the fact that if the house stays right around 30 to 40% RH, the wood won't crack, the materials should perform. They do not have an option to manage that level of variability. You can't say, whoa, I didn't know you wanted good air quality. You're like, well, of course you did. I didn't know you wanted to manage the interior humidity. Well, of course, that's the climate they live in. I live here in Phoenix. I have triple glazed windows in my house. I have a steam humidification system for the wintertime when the moisture levels tend to decrease, and I add a little bit of moisture. I have an ERV in my house for interior respiratory health, not because of whether you can afford it. It's the way that human beings function best. So I need fresh air for cognitive clarity, and I need humidity to keep my skin from, not giving me trouble. So as an industry, we just have to set the bar on where do you live, what's the client's conditions and expectations. Now, if you say, by the way, here's our parameters, no, not options. Is there anything I should know? Well, I had a client, I had PTSD. I need to sleep at 65 degrees. No problem. What we'll do is put a system in to help control that bedroom so that at night you can lower the temperature by a zone that will allow that to drop. Thank you. That's perfect. But I don't say, do you have a special humidity in mind? They're going to go, no, just comfortable. So we have to know the human condition, which you do well enough to say, here's our baseline. If you don't want to do that, you should say, then I shouldn't build for you. And they're going to come back and go, you're going to leave? And you're like, listen, I know what it's like to live in a home in this climate, and I know what my clients expect. So I'm giving you a house that's in the proper price point and the proper level of quality with a level of performance and durability that you should expect at any price point. So if you go to another builder, I would just expect that you would ask to make sure those things are included. They won't go to another builder. They're going to go, okay, yeah, we want the things you just said. Let's just do that. But we have to be clear about it and not assume that they know enough to add the feature that we know should be in there anyway.
One of the things that I wanted to ask you about is you have lived in two extreme climates. Good friends with Brad, and I always give him a hard time when your summers are like 120, or like you guys get 40 days in a row of above plus 120. I'm like, I need the cold, man. And he's like, I can't handle anything below freezing. But you've built and advised builders in Minnesota and in Arizona. Without spending the next hour on it, what are some there are some benefits to building in extreme climates, I would imagine, because we're sort of forced to do things based on our climate.
That's true.
Could you give us some observation? You go all over the country.
Yeah.
With two extremes, you've got a hot extreme and a cold extreme. And then you've got the middle of the country, which maybe I mean, right now with weather change, it seems like every climate has extremes. Just
Oh,
walk me through a little bit of what you've seen from your time in Minnesota to your
yeah.
time in Arizona. And I'd like to obviously talk a little bit about the home that you built here after this is done, but just maybe some observations on how
Mhm.
these extreme weather and extreme climate has actually sort of pushed the building industry in the right direction because we sort of have had to.
Yeah, I think that that matters, and it's much more than cold and hot. You know, if you looked, like I said, I was in Nashville and Indianapolis last week. Those are marketplaces that have winters and they have summers. The summers are hot and humid. The winters are cold and dry. A lot of variation. They might get 40 inches of rain a year, and Nashville gets 45 inches of rain a year. So you look at all the parameters, and if you said that every state in the U.S., I'll be in Washington State next week in Seattle, very different climate. Springtime, they've got moisture and mold condensing in the bottom of the roof decks. If they built the house and framed it in November, extraordinary levels of complexity. And the good thing, to be honest with you, about Minnesota is it's either really cold or it's hot and humid. And so you have challenging conditions. One of the most complex climates in the country is Minnesota. But if you look at all the climates, Texas, when you talk about Matt and the things that he goes through, hot, humid, damp, rainy winters and summers, they're always kind of crazy. What you find is that the more you build the house to be thermally efficient, high performance windows, excellent water management, and improved indoor conditions, it doesn't matter where you build that house. So in Arizona, I built a house with R30 walls, R60 roof deck, triple glazed windows, and extraordinarily airtight with mechanical ventilation and a VRF heat pump. What is different about that, Mark, than what I built? Would if I could I put that house in Minnesota? And you'd go in a heartbeat. So if you look at the building enclosure, as climate varies, all that happens for me is that my interior conditions maybe are a little bit easier to meet. I might say that in the summertime, we've got people here with $800 and $900 electric bills. I don't have that. So I do have a solar system on my roof. I do have a battery storage in my house, providing a nice balance. But my house is so quiet and it's so comfortable that I'm like, well, this design, it's ICFs and SIP roof and everything, but my house could easily fit in almost all of the climate zones. All the windows are properly flashed. We get 6 inches of rain a year. Philadelphia gets 60 inches of rain a year. Would you still flash windows in Arizona? Well, and flash them in Philadelphia? Well, so just do them all the right way. Do every window, flash them properly, use weather protection. If you do that in every climate, then you're not affected by the variations. What's going to happen in 10 years in Arizona? I don't know. How about 20 years? I don't know. Could the rain pick up? Could it get drier? You know what? This house is going to sit for 100 years. What's the chance of Minnesota varying the climate a bit by 100 years from now because of whatever the hell happens? Build a house tight, efficient, durable, make sure that it can manage the conditions, put the stego under the slab and go like this. I'm not sure what's coming. But whatever it is, I believe I built a house that's resilient enough to make it the next 100 years. Not,
I like
hey,
that
what did we
mindset.
get last winter? You're like, well, I don't care
I
about last winter.
I think what I like about the mindset, it goes back to something you said earlier, and lately a favorite question of mine on the podcast, and I guess I'll ask you, what was your childhood address of your home?
3041 Virginia Avenue in
Everyone,
Minneapolis.
everyone I've asked that question to remembers. And
Yeah.
the reason I keep bringing it up, and I think it's important with new guests to tell them as well, is that we as home builders are building a home that's not just Mark LaLiberte's home. It's going to be someone else's home and someone else's home and someone else's home and someone else's home. And there's a lot of pride in that. And yes,
Absolutely.
as that builder, you don't get the financial reward of these other homes. But I think most people never got into building for the financial side of it. Otherwise, they probably would have picked a different career, as we like to joke. But you do it because you love it. You do it because you care. And as a business owner now, obviously, profit's not a dirty word. Like, we're trying to run profitable businesses. I believe in that. It's best for the client. It's best for your families. The economic impact we have in this country is incredible through the course of home building and remodeling. But where I'm going with this is I like the idea that being more mindful of this is not just, yes, I'm building, if you're my client, Mark, I'm building for you, but I'm also building for that future generation. My wife is a physician, so I use a lot of doctor quotes and stuff, but like, do no harm. it's like, that's the Hippocratic oath. Like I want to do, like, if I've had clients before, I have this thing with you. I can't remember if you agree with this or not, or if maybe I heard it from you. Like in Minnesota, people that want to put a skylight in are freaking crazy to me. I'm like, why would I take a perfectly good house and cut a hole in the hole in the roof? Like, this is nuts. And I'm not saying that there's not products out there to do this. I'm just saying Mark Williams won't do that. And I had an architect, and I really liked their design. It was killer. And I actually brought this up to you a couple of years ago. They had skylights in every bathroom in the house on a flat roof of a flat roof house, which I know in Minnesota is also kind of a kiss of death to you. And anyway, and I'm like, guys, I'm on board with the flat roof because it looks so cool. I got swayed by the sexy. I'm like, this is a sexy looking house. But I said, you got to get rid of the skylights. I said, I can't have skylights in my shower in the middle when it's negative 25. I'm just thinking like, you're gonna have stalagmites of ice coming down off of these windows. I'm like, I can't do it. And the architect listened. And I think sometimes, and I said it obviously probably a way I just did, like funny, or in a way that like is, you're explaining to them, you're letting them enter in. And this is a collaboration. I'm really probably never going to sign up for any sort of deal where somebody is like absolute, because I just don't think there's that many absolute things in life. Maybe gravity, but maybe not even that. Go to the moon. But like the point of it is like, if someone is so dogmatic about one thing, I'm just not sure I'm your right fit, because I believe in collaboration. And it was a real mark to that architect and other people that saying like, you know what, I understand that you have to warranty this house for 10 years in Minnesota, which is a long time. And you are very concerned about this. Let's work. And you know what the client was like? Yeah, I never really liked him anyway. I was like, oh my word. Like, we did all of this and he didn't even care anyway. So anyway, this isn't supposed to be a knock on skylights. And anyway,
what's a good analogy, Mark? It's a good analogy to consider the fact that when are you as the business professional that's going to warrant that house, not only for 10 years or however long the period is, it's a word you want to remember, and it's called reputation. And you work on that continuously. So let's say 20 years from now, there's a reputation of the product that Mark Williams built, and you are pass this on to a child, or you sell it to another business, but all of your clients remember the house they built with you. So I would say reputation is personal. I'm going to give you my personal reputation and put that on the line. So I'm only going to do the right thing. There's plenty of people that don't. But if you're one of those guys, which you are, I've known you for a while, Mark, that says, I do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. And that's what I will continue to do. As I raise my knowledge about my industry, I will deliver that product to my clients. If they don't want it, then they're probably not the right client. If a client does, have you ever built a house for a client you wish you wouldn't have built for? And the answer is always yes. And you're like, well, when did you know that was happening? Pretty early on. They were such a drag early on, but I thought I would power through it. And at the end, I lost money and they still hate me. So I should have passed on that one. You set your boundary for people to say, I believe that the reason I want you, I love the way you communicate. I love your process. I'm excited about the design and the product. And you said you're comfortable and confident you can execute on that. Let's do this together. Then your job is to close the sale and move on to the next phase. And that's your job. And I think that if we look at that as entrepreneurs, we have to do all of those things. You have to not only solicit the clients, work with an architect if you're lucky, find the client, move them through the pre-operational sequence, get them to the stage where they go like, I'm ready to go with you, Mark. And you're like, well, let's put a contract together at the Contractor Coalition Summit. You walk through the details about good contracts. You get through that phase and say, now let's get started. I'll take pictures. We'll send things. You come out here. All your trades are confident with what you're doing. That's the executed process that you have to follow. And if you do that, you're like, I'm less stressed. When my wife and I go on vacation, I know I've got a team back there that's going to exceed expectations. I'm good. And I think you have to build a business like that.
You shared a story a couple of years ago that I had listened to, and you had mentioned, I can't remember, you'll remember who it was. Well, there was Colorado, where he decided out of the blue he was going to build only net zero homes. Right. And that's all he built. And someone comes to him and says, I want this other home. Like, I'm sorry, that's not, I'm really impressed with people that are so well defined with who they are, what they want to do, that they can have this singular brand. I feel like probably more people than not are not like that. They see opportunity and they try to make it work. And I do think we would all be a little better off if we could be a little bit more singular in our brand. Or it doesn't always have to be a style. Like, I mean, there's certain architects, like they only do one style. And I actually, there's one of them I really want to bring on the podcast. Well, Charles Stinson, you know who he is. Yeah. And so I just think his style is beautiful. You see it all over, of course, Southwest. You see it up in in Minnesota too. But you know a Charles Stinson house when you see it. And so I'm just really impressed. I wonder how often people have approached him and say, hey, I'd love you to do this style of home. I mean, maybe he's done them. I just don't know about him. He's like, but you stay so specific to your one craft, your one thing. It's really admirable. And I think all of us entrepreneurs should take another look at, rather than trying to add more to our repertoire, is probably take away and do less. And I personally have a hard time with this because I like more and more and more. So it's really against my nature to sort of slim it down and get more specific. But I do see the value as an entrepreneur to get very specific, because now your clients know who you are. You're not just A through Z. Like, they're getting exactly what you are identifying, and you're going to identify your ideal client a lot faster, I think.
Yeah, but let's say that you're still okay being broad in scope, but you have a narrow focus on exactly the quality of product
Sure.
that you build. Whether it's a flat roof, whether it's a Frank Lloyd Wright design, is irrelevant.
Agreed.
Every time that I make a connection point, this has to be properly detailed and flashed. Every time I put a window in a recessed buck, I've got to make sure it's slightly sloped so it drains away. Whenever I put in a foundation, I make sure it's insulated, and I put non-paper faced gypsum in the lower level to prevent mold. That doesn't care whether it's flat or crooked.
No, 100% agree with you on
So I
that.
would say when you go, there's a Mark Williams design that I like to build, which is the enclosure itself. You put the stuff on the outside, which is the 90% of what nobody sees. You're doing the inside, and the outside's going to go, wow, this is amazing. It's a Stinson house. It's a D.W. Druitt, which is a builder here in Arizona, which is extraordinary, like Stinson. And you look at that house, you're like, but it was built by this, and there's no variation in your standard and approach. You learn to be deeper in your skill set, and you're like going, so they're going to put CMU in this particular area, and I have to find a way to insulate CMUs. We have to figure it out, but you're only going to do it watertight, thermally insulated, to prevent the concerns that physics creates. You're able to be flexible. You don't have to go, I only do Frank Lloyd Wright, but you can say, I'll only do it with these parameters met. And then you're like, I got it. And an architect's going to go, so can you do this? And you're like, let me look through it. Yeah, I can do that, but this is what I do. And they're going to go, cool. I just want you to make sure that when it's in a magazine and it's crazy, you did it. And you're
So no, I 100% agree with you, and I like that a lot. I wanted to ask you this before we ran out of time. So you have a net zero home that you built in Arizona, as we mentioned earlier on the podcast, and you advise people all over the country. We kind of joked before we came on air that I remember this old line my dad used to say, that talking about getting rid of the word perfection in building, because you're building a prototype. Each time is unique. And like he had often told me as a young entrepreneur, he said, there's not a single home that I built that I couldn't go into and find 10 things that I would have done differently, because it's a prototype. You're finding things. I'm curious to ask you advise people all over the country. People pay you money. You fly all over the country to do this. What were some things that you learned building your own home that either surprised you or kind of snuck up and you're like, wow, what did you learn in building your own home? Because it's a lot different. I mean, I know you have a lab, which is you're like beyond the 1%. You're like 1% of the 1% in terms of like, you literally have a lab in Colorado where you're testing all this stuff. But now you're building your own home, which now you have the things that you like and you think is cool on top of all these mechanical systems, plus your decades of pursuit. What did you learn building your own net zero house?
well, it's a great observation, because when you take the knowledge base and then you kind of throw it into a marketplace that you don't know very well, you are left with the challenges of trade contractors who are like going, who is this nut job that came in? Nobody in Arizona does that. Who would ever puts poly under a slab? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Your slab's going to blow up and you're going to wreck it. And you're like, whatever, just get that done. So we had to go through, there's a bit of a learning curve. I think Brad's group did a nice job of trying to say, whatever Mark wants, let's just do it, but let's understand why. So I'd say there's a few things I did. It was a really cool design. It was actually designed by an architect in Minneapolis, PKA Architecture. Yeah. And so what we did is we had a flat roof, and I probably would have done something different in terms of how I designed the trusses to make the interior roof flat, using a little flexibility in the trusses. But I used a SIP roof, so I had trusses on top of my ICF walls. All my mechanical systems ran through there. I decked that and created that as the air barrier. Then I brought in SIP panels from the folks down in southern Minnesota.
Extreme Panels?
Yeah, Extreme Panels, fabulous company. So I had Extreme Panel come in on a flatbed truck. They came in, they were 8 feet wide and 24 feet long. And the flatbed truck picked up on a crane, and they dropped the panels on top of that completed roof detail. The leftover on the sides acted as my overhangs that then shielded the walls, and I wrapped that with my metal fascia to give me my fascia look. Really turned out cool. So I had 5 foot overhangs in some areas that were extended beyond with using a SIP panel. So the enclosure itself was done to maintain all the interior conditions, and the SIP roof acted as an airtight, watertight assembly. So it was great. I just didn't spend enough time training the guys that were dropping the SIP panels on top because I was out working. So I came back and I'm like, well, you guys put them together using the splines, and they go, nah, we had a chainsaw and we just kind of cut those little tabs off. I'm like, don't. My heart just went. So I learned how critical it is that you do a really good explanation and you sit down with people. And I was traveling so much during there, and it was also during COVID. So a lot of trades were like, yeah, my whole crew's sick. And you're like, shut up. You just don't want to come up here, because I was a ways away from in Phoenix, I was north. So I would say that we had a kind of a challenging time, and it was a new strategy. So there were little things I'd say that communication is everything. As you know, what falls apart about any business is the lack of communication. It's of good quality. Asking, you said this early on, which is, I really wanted to enforce what you said so eloquently, is that the art of asking good questions is as important as the incredible art of listening. And so the listening skills that we don't have are ones that if we probe often enough and ask people, tell me about your experience, the things that are important to you, so that I can deliver what's important to me and we can understand better. That's just the foundation of good communication of human beings. And we don't do that enough. And I was telling the group that I was in Tennessee last week, I said, how often do you compliment your trades for doing good work while we spend more time hammering them for times when they don't do it well? So build your base. Trades have an A team, a B team, and a C team. You want the A team almost every time because they're the ones you've been working with. Encourage that trade contractor to give you the A team. And so I would work on that to say if somebody new came up, I was like, oh no, they don't know what my expectations are. I got to fix that. So I think all of us have realized that training and trade base, quality of communication, accuracy of details, and then monitoring things at the stage where you have to close it up before you clad the building, before you drywall and insulate, looking at all of the things that you'll find.
And let's be honest, practice makes perfect, as they say. I've often told some people that, let's say, whether it might be a painter or HVAC company or whoever, as we train them in, is I often will say, hey, this is our first project with you. And I do believe this. I think you have to do 3 projects with somebody before you both know each other, not only communication styles, skill set, the people. When you've worked with one company for 30, 40 years, I know their kids, their grandkids, you end up knowing them so deeply that that's not possible to replace 40 years of knowledge in one house. It takes a few homes. There's turnover, that they have people that change. But I think if we can extend loyalty to our trade partners, you will see it come back to you tenfold. And they realize that they're not just a number every single time. I often don't take, like one in that range before, I had 5 framing bids, like the low bid and the high bid. I mean, I definitely threw out the low bid because I'm like, they're not even in the ballpark. Like they're either going to hit me with so many change orders that it's going to make everyone's head spin, or B, they're incompetent, or C, like they're just going to walk off the job. Like none of those examples are good. Right. And so you need to develop a relationship. And, again, we can all make money. And years ago, I had a framer where they were so integral to my early career. And now one of them, Mike, is my PM. And I remember early on in the career, I said, you need to raise your rates. I said, you guys do amazing work. You're so conscientious. I want you around 10 years from now. But I said, you don't just raise your rates for me. You raise your rates on all the builders you work with. If I find out that you only raised it on me, I said, that's going to be a different story. But I'm telling you, you need to, and I think that's okay. I don't know how many other builders would say that, but it was in our community, my best interest there. It was a rising tide floats all boats. And guess what? It was better for the people we built for too, because they got a better home. And I think
the trade raised his business quality. He bought a new truck. Yep. He added things to his family. He hired another person, got some new tools. Those are what you expect. So we have to support the entrepreneurs that are supporting us. Yeah. And when we do that, we have to say, here's what I can do. How about if we work on this? I had a builder that he was a good sized builder in New Mexico. He helped the heating contractor grow. He goes, I like everything you do. You just can't respond quick enough to my work. How could I help you? And he goes, I don't have the cash flow to grow the business. He goes, then I'll cash flow you. But here's the deal. You stay consistent with me in price and you're honest with what you do. And you always put me first, but I'll help you grow. He helped fund his business and grow.
Wow.
Helped him get a new truck, new tools. And he then became one of the larger trade contractors in Albuquerque. And I think that he cared enough about saying, if I can find that your business model works, I'd like to replicate that.
That's an amazing story right there.
Yeah.
What are, from a cadence, going back to a question I asked, in the very beginning, in terms of, I have some ideas on how I want to bring my team and even some of my subcontractors out to construction instruction. How often should companies, a first step is get out there with actually, let's just design it live. So I have a team of 5. I would probably bring my PM and my project coordinator and myself, and just for the first time to go out, just to learn, see what it all is about. I'm sure you have multiple, 1 day, 3 day, 5 days. And you can talk about that later.
All 2 days.
And 2 days. Going out a second time, I'd probably just have my PM go out with maybe a couple framers. What would be a normal progression? And then how often would this cadence sort of repeat so that it stays fresh? Because one thing that I noticed, we went down to Builder Trend recently to learn a lot of their software. I know you use Builder Trend on your house. And it doesn't do me any good to go to that all alone and then come back and tell my team. I need to bring my team down there because they're the ones sort of implementing that knowledge base and training the subs. No different than if I'm going to construction instruction, I probably want to bring 1 or 2 of my main framers. I want to bring, some of my HVAC partners. I'd be curious to know, then ongoing, how do you see people sort of a longer path?
Yeah, we've had numerous builders that have come 5 and 6 times. We just had a D.R. Horton division in Spokane, Washington, send the teams down. And when they came back, they said it changed the whole way we looked at buildings. I would say you're right about the assessment of yourself, but some PMs and some people, project managers that are really part of the vision of your business, so that when you get together in the first day, you walk through the building science stuff and you go to dinner that night and go, what do you guys think? I think we need to do a better job of this. And you start building your next steps. The next day, you reinforce it. The programs about building science and physics and the stuff you learn in the lab. When you get done at the end of the day, we then talk about it and say, what kind of things are your takeaways that you're going to add to your business? Who else do you think needs to come? You're like, I definitely need an HVAC guy here. And then when you do your advanced, but we have, high performance building enclosures and then advanced building enclosures, like a 101 and a 201, and then there's an advanced HVAC systems where the heating contractors come in, they learn how to balance the loads, how to put the right diameter of duct in, how to get the right grills, how they measure flow, how you calculate the right load for the house. They walk away and they go, I was guessing at that for years. I would just go 4,000 square feet, probably 2 4-ton units, and you're like going, wait. So windows, building enclosure tightness, thermal efficiency, they would go through and do all the calculations and go, wow, I was guessing. So I could be more competitive now, but sell better equipment, include the ERV for the same price. And the builder's going to go, I get all of this for this price. And you're like, yeah, I optimized all systems, including the diameter of the duct and where it runs. The builder goes, I want you. So that's the evolution of all those, whether it's framers, we've had insulators come. And so I think it's about who in your group do you need to be on board. I've got architects that come. There's an architect out of Salt Lake City who's been there 3 times. And he goes, I'm a different kind of architect. He goes, I believe that these things have to be included. Some architects go, look, I'm just going to do the physical design and the aesthetics. You figure it out from here. And you're like, okay, great designs. Your CDs are like, and so I'll take it from here.
Yeah, I've got 1,000 ideas that are spinning. We'll have to talk about offline. Maybe last question is, just because I want to respect your time and the audiences as well. Yeah. You've been in this industry a long time. What do you see the future looking like? You've seen kind of in the past, because it's funny, I had Andy Pace on. I don't know if you know him, from Wisconsin. He does a lot about wellness, and we didn't talk a lot about it today. We'll maybe pick it up another time, because we're talking a lot of efficiencies and those types of things. And there is an overlap of wellness, but sometimes they're in conflict. Right. Just because something's environmentally sound doesn't make it good for humans, and right. Vice versa. Well, anyway, it's really opened up my eyes. And I had Andy on the podcast 3 months ago, and he was like, I've been talking about this since the 80s. He goes, it's just the first time that people are finally listening. And I have to imagine somebody like you, who has been educating people since the 80s and 90s, is finally like, oh my word, people are finally paying attention after 4 decades. Anyway, I'd love to hear a little, just like how has that journey been to you, and like to keep doing it? And then the next is like, where do you see the future going?
That's a great question, Mark. I would say that I know people in my industry that in the education industry that have become quite cynical about that. And I'm like, you can't be cynical. And I never let that happen. I think that we have to evolve as an industry. We're always been a very conservative industry in terms of the way in which we progress. We still frame houses like we did in late 1800s, right? The lumber is delivered to the mud. A guy shows up with a nail gun. The most advanced thing is now a cordless nail gun. So the process is pretty well proven that it's just how it's going to work. I was in Texas 2 weeks ago, and they still hand frame their roofs. They don't use trusses. So I'm like, the guy goes, I said, why don't you use trusses? Oh, you can't use trusses in Texas. I go, yeah, you can, but it's okay. It's okay. I don't care. I don't care. Right. So I think that we have to be continually motivated to always improve the industry at whatever level it's at, whatever level they come to you. Then we go to that place and help them further on their career. That's our job. You have to be patient and listen. I think the difficulty moving forward, as well as the excitement about moving forward, is that everybody's considering AI to be one of the great industry challenges. I was in San Francisco recently, and I had to get an Uber ride down to Santa Clara. And so I'm doing that, and I'm in the car, and it's a nice Tesla that I'm riding in and everything. And I asked the guy, I said, so, how well you been doing? He goes, well, I used to be a software engineer, but I'm now a Tesla driver in Uber. He said, my industry is being taken over through AI. And I'm like, interesting. The home building industry is going to struggle to have AI take out the guy putting down the poly under your slab. So we might be in better shape for that. I think that when we look at our industry in terms of advanced technologies, what you use AI for will be helping you improve specifications, maybe improved scheduling things. All of those things will be a benefit. The architectural community is concerned because it might take that marketplace away. Someone still has to exercise on this detail. It's got to physically be built. So what an exciting time for us to look at. All of the knowledge that's in AI tells you build tight, thermally efficient, design it to be water managed and water efficient. If you do all those things, it becomes universal again. So let's make sure that all of us are committing to the best built product we can, so that in generations from now, the knowledge of 2025 will show up in 2075. And it'll say, wow, I'm really glad that they took the knowledge of the day and they applied that today, because it's made houses healthier and more efficient. And we've learned more about in human health, so that if we live in those environments that are better for us, quiet, comfortable, indoor air quality, proper lighting, those are all human conditions we have to take advantage of and be careful about. We're pretty sensitive things, so we have to be careful with that. And if we do a good job of that, generations in the future will benefit from those choices. Will factory crafted housing be a future? And I'm thinking it will be. We will see more people where they go to a factory, they do build the house, it comes out, it's still assembled in pieces, cam locks, lock them in place. We finish things, they can still be beautiful and creative. I had a house in Carmel that came in 12 truckloads. And when they put it together, there is no way you could have told that came off of a truck.
So
And it was
I knew I wouldn't get away. I had to ask another question. You just opened Pandora's box.
of course.
Part two, 1 hour. Supply and demand is still alive and well, and we're in a marketplace that rewards, obviously, capitalism. Where I'm going with this is, if SIP panels has been touted for a long time as kind of like the end all be all for a lot of different things. I know the answer is probably somewhere in the middle, that it's just not one solution for everything. But going back to these homes that are pre-built, like you were just talking about, if they were so good and so efficient, and so, especially with a declining labor pool, which we have been anticipating for quite some time, why you would think the national builders, Lennar, Pulte, like they would have dumped millions of dollars into development and figuring this stuff out. Like a little small pop shop like me, like we're going to build a little cabin next year, and it's a little Monopoly house. It's got 4 walls and a simple 412 roof or whatever it is. It's going to look cool and kind of Scandinavian. But I'm thinking, you know what? I might try to just play around with SIP on my own cabin, just to play around with it to see what it looks like. It's up a little remote, so there's some advantages to doing it.
Would be cool.
But just to understand, so I could educate clients on it. But it's a pain in the butt when we're so used to building one way to learn how to build a whole nother way. It's a whole nother set of systems, and I'm sure there's other things that are overlap. But why hasn't it taken off more? Is it simply because we don't want to change? But I have to believe that the bigger companies, they probably have dedicated teams looking at this. And if it made financial sense, they would have done it just based on numbers. Why has it not? Why, your opinion, why has it not become more mainstream if it really is better and more efficient?
Yeah, it's a good question, Mark. I think part of it is that when you look at the production builders, remember they answer to Wall Street. And so in other industries or industries not governed by Wall Street, they would be more apt to say, let's spend the next few years experimenting with this and bringing the technology forward. Pulte put together a SIP plant, operational plant in Atlanta. They built the whole thing. They were going to do SIPs, panels, and plant. After about 3 quarters, they weren't seeing any profitability of it. They shut the thing down. You're like, well, wait a minute. This is a long-term commitment you make to improving buildings. And so what happens is, for example, the difficulty in the United States is that we have such a large physical territory to put up manufacturing plants and large levels of shipments. Right now, I work at a company in Salt Lake City that is buying all of their wall panels prefabricated out of a company. It's called NA Structures out of Quebec, and they're being transported in. They've got right now 18 houses that are all framed. They're using engineered lumber for all the studs and framing. They ship it all the way out. A crane on site puts the walls together. BFS, the Builders First Source, they do all their pre-cut lumber packages. We're seeing probably 40%, I bet, of the market in this country is now pre-cutting all of their lumber. The studs are all pre-cut. They're labeled and lettered. They match the top plate. That's becoming pretty much standard approach that you're seeing. That there's multiple companies that are doing pre-cut packages. There's multiple companies in a large scale that are doing all their wall panels. When I was with Beazer Homes in one of the markets, they said all our panels come out pre-set. All we do is stand up the panels. So there's the evolution from cutting, framing to the saws out. We're going to have the panel come in. It's all laid out on the plan, and we stack them, secure them, move on. Framed and assembled in a day. So it's also accurate, dead straight, no extra studs. So that's happening right now. Scandinavian countries are able to do almost all, 90% of their homes are all factory crafted, but they have a very small shipping area, right? In the US, the fact that these houses for Salt Lake City are coming out of Quebec, NA Structures, is amazing. They're very busy. There's a builder in New Hampshire, which is called, and Matt has talked about it in his podcast, where they're building the whole house, shipping the whole entire thing, wall, frame, insulation, and you just assemble the parts. So we will watch a balance between performance expectations and the performance of the crews, find that it's easier to buy the systems assembled. I worked with a group out of Portland. It's called Mod, and Mod builds townhouses and condos, all pre-manufactured, insulated, put in the cabinets, and they come out in parts on a flatbed, and a crane drops them in place. So we're not far from that. And you look at other companies. Berkshire Hathaway had purchased the company that they bought that was all building. They're the largest manufactured and pre-manufactured houses company in the country. So it's further along than we think. But I would say that there are pieces and parts that will begin seeing more structures come together. And I think SIPS has found a home. It's time.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to see what the future holds from that standpoint. Well, thanks again for coming on.
I did my first SIP house in 2021 in Minneapolis, out in Prior Lake. And I did the whole thing. I had my trades come in. The SIP guys sent out a crew. They assembled, put all the walls together. My framers came back, did the interior wall partitions, and put on the trusses. So that's 20 years ago. So I would look forward to any time I get to run into you. I think I'll see you in Omaha.
I'll see you in a couple of weeks at the Contractor Coalition. Shout out to what we're doing there. And I think you've been our opening night speaker. You're like, Billy Joel opening up on the keyboard. You always start off the coalition with a bang. So appreciate you coming on. We'll have all your information in the show notes. And thanks for tuning into the Curious Builder. Appreciate it.
It's great to see you. Thank you. And good job on the work you're doing to help educate our industry. Well done.
I appreciate it. We've had the podcast now for 2.5, almost 3 years now, and we have a consulting page, one-to-one consulting. You can book my time for 1 hour. Perhaps you've heard a guest where you like one of the topics. Maybe you want an introduction to some of the guests that I've had on. Perhaps you want to talk about branding or marketing or anything that we've covered on the podcast over the last 2.5 years. You can book a time at curiousbuilderpodcast.com. Thanks for tuning in to the Curious Builder Podcast. If you like this episode, do us a favor, share it with 3 other business owners. The best way that we can spread what we're doing is by word of mouth, and with your help, we can continue to help other curious builders expand their business. Please share it with your friends, like and review online, and thanks again for tuning in.